Yeah, I think she sort of hit the nail on the head there by saying that, people have this innate need to seek a hero, to seek a savior figure when they feel like they're disenfranchised. They feel helpless, hopeless, and that drives them psychologically to want to seek out some sort of Superman character to come save the world, and it's just not realistic in our situation. There are no saviors. Like I've said this before, there are no saviors, there are no heroes in politics. There's just different levels of evil, and sometimes there are principled people who get in. It's very rare. It's almost non-existent in today's world. And even historically, I mean, the few people, the politicians, especially in countries that are very powerful, you're rarely ever going to find someone that's principled, that has a good conscience, has a moralistic approach, that's going to make his way to the top of such a ruthless system. I mean, that's true for the United States. That's true for Russia. That's true for China. I don't think it's even possible for somebody that has a conscience to make their way through the ranks of these various governments, because it's so corrupt. It's so evil at its core, at its systemic, at its roots. These political systems favor criminals, favor psychopaths. And, just look what happened to JFK, right? I mean, he was principled on a few issues, and they took the guy out and assassinated him in broad daylight. So why are we putting false hope in a guy that's been in power in Russia for 15 years? He's been running that country for a decade like his own personal fiefdom. And he comes right out of that system. He emerged and was birthed through the KGB system. He was a KGB agent his whole career. He then became the chief of the FSB. Are you telling me that a man that's a true dyed-in-the-wool Christian man with Christian ethics and Christian morals can make it to the top of the KGB, one of the most ruthless organizations to ever disgrace the planet with its existence, going back to the days of the Bolsheviks? And
Brandon, aren't you listening to Brother Nathaniel's videos? Come on, man, get on the team.
That's right.
I like some of that stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's interesting, but all of us have to maintain sophistication. All of us have to look at things, and I like Brother Nathaniel, and I like some of the stuff he exposes about the organized, let's say, kosher Nostra mafia. But at the same time, to throw 100% backing behind Vlad, I think is almost suckerish as well. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, with him, first of all, he's a true believer in the Christ mythology of that, there's going to be a Messiah that's going to come one day and save the world. So he's physically actually looking for some sort of Messiah to save the world, and he believes that that's going to happen. And apparently he's decided that guy is Vladimir Putin. But I mean, one thing I question about him is he's said that he's a member of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia or whatever, and that just tells me that he's completely biased, because he's a member of the Russian Orthodox Church, so of course he's backing Putin. He's just a mouthpiece for. I mean, the Russian Orthodox Church has been infiltrated since the days of Stalin by the KGB. It's basically run by the KGB. So I suspect there's something weird going on there. But we see this huge mobilization coming from certain sectors, as you said, in the quote alt media, that are just putting all of their eggs in one basket, and that's the Putin basket. He's going to save the world. He's going to save us all from tyranny. It's just a fantasy narrative. First of all, if we just look into some of the history, I mean, a lot of people don't go into Putin's history, right? They just start the clock at like the year 2008 or something, when he started to butt heads with the U.S. and say, oh, look how principled he is. He's criticizing the United States in public and so on and so forth. But when you look at his early career, he was fully in bed with George W. Bush. Right after 9/11, Vladimir Putin was the first guy to call Bush on the phone and pledge Russian support for the war on terror. He was fully
Pooty Poot, yeah.
Right, and
that was Bush's little pet name for Vlad was Pooty Poot. Yeah, go ahead.
So we see him shaking hands with Bush. We see him shaking hands with Benjamin Netanyahu and pledging his support for Israel. He's been very open about that. In the last Gaza campaign, Putin came out in support of Israel's massacre of 2,400 people or so, touting the familiar Zionist propaganda talking points. He has business relations with Israel, extensive trade deals, weapons deals, and so forth. My argument has always been that Putin is a businessman first and foremost. He doesn't believe in anything that he's telling you. He puts on this Christian veneer to win over the Christians. Well, yeah, he also puts on a yarmulke when he goes to Israel. He builds mosques. He tries to win over every single camp to solidify his grip on power. He's just playing these different groups off against each other, putting out these little crumbs, right? He throws out these statements once in a while. He'll make that comment about, the Jews being involved in the Bolshevik regime, but then the next year he bans Holocaust denial in Russia, and he just recently banned supposedly anti-Semitic biblical commentary. He put a new law in place. So he's disingenuous in all of his public statements. He's really just trying to cater to different factions by throwing out little crumbs that they can chew on, so that they think he's on their side and that he can maintain his grip on power. I actually was listening to one of your shows recently, and one of your callers tipped me off to this article here. It's called The Hidden Author of Putinism, and it goes into the history of this guy named Vladislav Surkov, who is Putin's sort of political architect, his brains behind Putinism and the regime, and the strategies that are put forth. And this is precisely exactly what I've been saying about Putin. He is an opportunist businessman whose only concern in life is to maintain power in Russia, and he doesn't believe in any kind of moral principles. He doesn't believe in anti-Zionism as some anti-Zionists think he believes. And obviously the evidence proves that he's not anti-Israel. He's fully in support of Israel. But this article goes into how this Surkov guy would use the stratagem of basically confusing all the different political factions that exist especially within Russia, playing them off against each other, playing both sides, right? It says that he'll fund different groups that are opposed to each other.